حتى إذا بلغ مغرب الشمس وجدها تغرب في عين حمئة.
They call it the final revelation, the unaltered word, a text so pristine that for 14 centuries believers have claimed it contains not a single contradiction, not one scientific falsehood. But critics point to specific verses, clear errors, they say, primitive cosmology trapped in 7th century ignorance, the sun setting in a muddy pool, mountains hammered into earth like tent pegs, a world spread flat beneath our feet. Yet somehow, these same errors inspired the greatest scientific renaissance the medieval world had ever seen. What if everything we've been told about these contradictions is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how language works? This is the story of 3 famous mistakes and the extraordinary minds who saw something entirely different. Verse 1886, the story of Dhul Qarnayn, a legendary traveler who journeys to the edge of the known world. Until, when he reached the setting of the sun, he found it setting in a spring of dark mud. Critics seize upon this verse as Exhibit A. The Qur'an, they argue, teaches that the sun literally plunges into a muddy spring at the edge of a flat earth, a geocentric fairy tale, proof of human authorship by a desert merchant unfamiliar with heliocentrism. But there's a word here that changes everything. Wajada. Not it was, but he found it. He perceived it. He experienced it. This isn't cosmology, it's phenomenology. The verse describes subjective human experience, not objective astronomical data. When you watch the sun set over the Pacific, you don't say, "I'm observing the Earth's rotation creating an apparent descent of our star below the local horizon." You say, "The sun is setting in the ocean." Medieval Islamic scholars understood this distinction immediately. Al-Tabari, in the 9th century, documented multiple interpretations, including the phenomenological reading. Ibn Kathir noted the language of human perception. We still speak this way. The sun rises, the moon comes out, stars fall from the sky. The Quran isn't making a scientific claim about solar mechanics. It's describing the profound human moment when a traveler reaches the western edge of his world and watches the great cycle of day surrender to night. The mistake isn't in the text. It's in reading poetry as if it were a physics textbook. If you want history without the bias, the kind that doesn't reduce ancient texts to caricatures or apologetics, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe, because what we're about to uncover in the next 2 examples will completely reframe how you think about science and scripture. Verse 78:7, mountains as pegs. And the mountains as stakes? Critics mock this as ignorant geology. Mountains aren't stakes. They're not driven into the earth. They form through tectonic uplift, volcanic activity, orogeny. The Quran, they conclude, reflects the primitive cosmology of nomadic tribes, who thought mountains were divine tent pegs holding down a flat earth. Except, in 1855, a British astronomer named George Airy proposed something radical. Mountains, he theorized, must have roots, deep roots, extending far below the surface, much like icebergs hidden beneath water. He called it isostasy, the principle that Earth's crust floats on the denser mantle below, and mountains require deep foundations to maintain equilibrium. Later seismic studies confirmed it. Mountains have roots that plunge 5 to 6 times deeper than their visible height. Everest, towering 5 miles above sea level, is anchored by a root system reaching 30 miles down. The metaphor of the peg isn't primitive, it's precise. and 9th century Islamic scholars were already exploring these concepts. Al-Biruni wrote extensively about geological processes. Ibn Sina theorized mountain formation through uplift and erosion. They didn't read mountains as pegs and conclude childish literalism. They read it as an invitation, a sign, pointing toward deeper investigation. The Quran doesn't claim to be a geology manual. It presents mountains as stabilizers, a claim that, when examined through the lens of isostasy, reveals unexpected sophistication. Quick question for you, before we get to the final example. Have you ever heard these critiques before? The muddy pool, the mountain pegs, the claims of primitive science? Drop a comment. Just type yes or no. I'm genuinely curious how widespread these arguments are, and whether this reframing is new to you. Verse 88:20. The spread out earth. And at the earth, how it is spread out. Here, critics are certain they've found the smoking gun. The Quran explicitly teaches a flat earth. Case closed. But once again, the architecture of language betrays a different story. Sutihat, from the root sataha, to spread, to extend, to make level for walking. The verse isn't making a cosmological claim. It's describing human experience. When you stand on Earth, even on a sphere, your local environment appears flat and navigable. This is observational language, not astronomical doctrine, and Islamic scholars knew Earth was spherical. Al-Biruni, in the year 1025, calculated the Earth's circumference with stunning accuracy, within 200 kilometers of modern measurements. He used a mountain, trigonometry, and pure empiricism. He measured the angle to the horizon from a mountaintop, combined it with the mountain's height, and derived Earth's radius. Ibn Hazm, a contemporary, wrote explicitly, "The Earth is round, and the evidence for this is that the sun and stars do not rise and set over all people at the same time." These weren't Western discoveries exported eastward. These were Islamic intellectuals who read the Quran and saw signs. Not data points, but invitations to observe. The Quran repeatedly uses the phrase ayat, signs, not equations, not blueprints, signs that point the observer toward deeper understanding of the natural world. The so-called flat earth verse didn't trap these minds in ignorance. It liberated them to measure, calculate, and explore. So what have we discovered? 3 famous errors, each dissolving under the weight of linguistic precision and historical context. The muddy pool. Phenomenology, not cosmology. The mountain pegs, a metaphor vindicated by geology. The spread earth, observational language on a spherical world. These verses weren't obstacles to scientific progress. They were catalysts. The Islamic Golden Age didn't happen despite the Quran. It happened, in part, because scholars read these texts as invitations to study creation itself. They understood something we've forgotten in our modern literalism, that a text can speak to human experience without sacrificing truth, that subjective description and objective reality can coexist, that metaphor can illuminate what data alone cannot. The mistakes aren't in the Quran, they're in how we've learned to read. If this reframes something for you, whether you're a believer, a skeptic, or someone just fascinated by history, share this with someone who needs to see it. The journey into the light of the Golden Age is just getting started.